On this episode of WarDocs, we have the privilege of speaking with Army nurse and recent recipient of the Henry M. Jackson Foundation's Hero of Military Medicine Award, retired Lieutenant Colonel Darcie Greuel. Darcie shares her story of becoming an Army medic and serving for 20 years as an enlisted soldier. Following a career highlight 2003 deployment to Afghanistan, she became a commissioned officer in the Army Nurse Corps and served for another 20 years in the United States Army Reserves. She talks about her many unique experiences and insights from a distinguished career, which has included deployments, humanitarian missions, service in the VA system, as well as Army Medical Unit commands. Find out more about Lieutenant Colonel Greuel and our previous guests on our website, wardocspodcast.com. And make sure you follow WarDocs on your preferred podcast platform and subscribe to our WarDocs YouTube channel. I'm your host, Dr. Doug Soderdahl, retired Army urologist.
Welcome to WarDocs, the military medicine podcast. This show brings you a first-hand, behind-the-scenes look into the mission, unique opportunities, and deployed experiences of the entire military healthcare team. From state-of-the-art hospitals in the United States to the most austere environments across the globe, WarDocs has you covered.
Today, we're privileged to welcome United States Army Reserve nurse, Lieutenant Colonel Darcie Greuel to WarDocs. She's a recent honoree of the Henry M. Jackson Foundation Military Medicine Hero Recognition Program. Darcie, thanks for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to share my story.
So let's start with that story. How did you start a career in military medicine? How did you come about joining the Army and ending up a medic?
Back in the day, 1984, I was in high school still. And that's when I officially raised my hand and joined the United States Army Reserve. We had local recruiters coming to the high school fairly often to try and recruit people into service. And I had a few friends that had some interest, and they talked me into going down to talk with them. And it was not right there on the spot, but I was very interested for a couple reasons. One was that I consider myself to be a patriotic person, and I've had people in my family who have served in the military, and I've always thought highly of them for doing that. So I wanted to serve my country as well. And the other reason was really because I wanted to go to college, and I knew that my parents weren't able to financially, afford to pay for my college, and that it was going to be up to me to figure out a way to do it myself. So this seemed like a great opportunity to kind of get the best of both worlds, to join and to serve, and then also have some assistance from the Army to help pay for my college.
So how did you wind up in the medical field? Was that something that you had wanted to do before you went to, or the recruiters came and saw you, or was it something like, wow, this sounds really cool, I'd be interested?
Well, part of the process of figuring out, what occupational specialty I was going to have was meeting with the recruiter, and he shared various different things with me. I knew 100% that I did not want to be what I consider to be a paper pusher, or somebody kind of working in an office environment. That would be boring. I didn't have any desire to work with machinery or vehicles or maintenance or anything like that. That was something that was definitely not me. So that was a no-go. But then he mentioned this specific occupation that was called medical specialist at the time. And it basically was one of the only things that he shared with me that was an opportunity for me to do something working with people. And I'm a people person. I really love working with people. Honestly, I never, ever in my life up until that point thought of medical as a profession. Because I was really one of those kids who had a big fear of going to the doctor's office over the years, growing up, fear of shots and what are they going to do, some of that fear of the unknown stuff. And I just never thought that would be something that I would be interested in. But because he, kind of pitched it and presented it as a way to work with people, I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So got through basic training and got to, Fort Sam Houston for the medical, medic training. And I got over a lot of those fears real quickly with drill sergeants, and cadre in your face, But it was really something that I had never thought of. But I almost instantly really came to love this thing called medicine and helping other people in a way, and taking care of them. So I literally liked it so much, when I got back to, home station after all my training phases. The Army really, over the years, has offered me and afforded me many opportunities to continue growing in the medical profession, and I chose nursing. And quite honestly, it's literally one of the biggest passions of my life, and I can't even ever imagine not wanting to be a nurse now, because it's something that I really love.
So one of the highlights of your career that you had we talked about before was a deployment towards the end of your enlisted career when you deployed to Bagram, Afghanistan in 2003. You were a sergeant first class, and you served as the NCOIC of the Intermediate Care Ward at the 452 Combat Support Hospital. Tell us about that experience and how you felt, if you were prepared to do it, and how did that shape your future career decisions?
Well, probably my deployment to Afghanistan in 2003 for almost a year was probably the biggest highlight of my career. I had already been in for a number of years. In fact, I completed my 20th year while I was over there. But when we got the call, it wasn't that it was unexpected. We thought perhaps that might happen. But, we spent years and years, literally years of training in field environments and setting up the hospital and taking it down and setting it up and moving it and filling it up with all the equipment and medical training. And so many years we spent doing that. The majority of us had never experienced a war situation. And we often found ourselves wondering out in the field late at night, would this really work if we were ever to get the call? Like, would we really be able to operate and literally operate and do, medical operations in these tents and with this equipment? It seemed like we had such old equipment that we had to use. We often wondered, like, would this really work? So, lo and behold, the call came in February of 2003. And, I found myself getting the call and having to have that conversation with my family, which was not an easy one. I have three children, to let them know that, I was going to be at least initially going up to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin for a few months to train for the possibility, if we get the call, that we would be ready. The call came a few months later, and we were getting off a plane in Bagram, Afghanistan, and none of us really knew what to expect. There was a lot of fear of the unknown. But the minute we hit the ground, I think we were all, it sounds weird to say excited, but there was a lot of energy and a lot of, teamwork and things that were involved with us establishing our area of operations in the hospital and, being prepared to take casualties. It was an awful lot of work that we had to do to make that happen. So I guess despite, being in a war zone, which many people think like, what do you mean exciting to be in a war zone? But despite, the fact that we were in a place as a war zone, we were in very austere conditions. The majority of us were working in the medical field back home. So we definitely did not have all of the, like supplies and equipment and things that were literally at our fingertips when we were working in our medical facilities back home, nor did we have the greatest living conditions. We were living in tents and it was hot and dirty and, everything else. But despite all of that, our team came together in a way that I had never experienced prior to that throughout my military career. We literally were so prepared. It was just a huge, I guess, I don't know how to call it, an honor for us to have this opportunity. So we mostly were given the mission of taking care of, American and coalition forces. Thankfully for us, we didn't see a huge number of those forces. We did have some, but it almost ended up being like a humanitarian mission. We saw a lot of children, and none of us ever had any training prior to this mission on anything to do with IEDs, explosive devices, or You know, it was hard to wrap your mind around the fact that you were in a dangerous place and you had to really kind of think about, everyone as being a potential enemy. Be careful what you say or, what you do, and, be aware of your surroundings. It was just something that I definitely, wasn't a way that you normally live your life, thinking of those things. So just getting your mind, to, be in that environment along with, what we were doing as the mission was really challenging for many of us.
How do you prepare mentally for that? If you come from, rural Wisconsin or even downtown Wisconsin, you're not used to seeing IEDs or children getting blown up or these kind of weird diseases. How do you prepare mentally for that?
I think a lot of it had to do with training. We spent a little over 3 months at Fort McCoy preparing, our equipment, and getting it packed up and ready to ship overseas, and training, for the mission, medical training. But we also received an extensive amount of training regarding the enemy, the environment that we were about to go into, the people, the culture, all kinds of things. It came at us real fast, for sure, but I feel like that's kind of how we had to mentally prepare, just to get as much information as we could regarding the mission itself and kind of where we were going, and what to expect. Certainly, none of that training really prepared you. You have to experience something like that. That's really the only way. But there was something about being with a team of people who you've been working with for many years and you trust, and trained alongside, knowing that we were all in it together to accomplish one mission. That was soothing, just to know that you weren't in it alone and you're with a whole group of people.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I experienced too. It's just amazing to see a team come together. Even though you've never seen this scenario before exactly in training, you rely on that training and come together and are able to accomplish some great things. And so, yeah, that's a commonality that we often hear about those deployment experiences. You did mention that it seemed somewhat like a humanitarian mission, and I know that earlier in your enlisted medical career, you had the opportunity to participate in some humanitarian missions in places like Bolivia, Ecuador, Haiti, Colombia. Tell us why those experiences were important for you and any lessons you learned about providing care to underserved populations in austere locations.
Ooh, again, those missions are always super rewarding. Again, we prepare and we do a lot of training. And oftentimes, the training that we do is simulated. We're not usually taking care of real human patients. We have very advanced, mannequins and whatnot and technologies. However, nothing can replace real hands on training with human beings. So these were opportunities that we literally were able to go and experience, that opportunity. I think none of us was prepared for what that mission or those missions would be like either. Going to a third world country, knowing that most of the population that we would be seeing was in very remote areas, and many of those people had never received any actual formal medical care probably in their whole lives. We would usually set up in little rural areas at schoolhouses, and we would arrive to the sites early in the morning, and literally there would be hundreds, if not thousands, of people standing in line waiting for their opportunity, to see the American doctors and nurses. It was extremely overwhelming, and the magnitude of what we were experiencing, it was like something that you just never had ever thought about before, that there would be that such an incredible showing of people who were, wanting to get care. Something that really we basically take for granted here. We get sick or whatever, we go to the doctor, and so in my high school years, I was a foreign exchange student, and I had the opportunity to live in Peru as a foreign exchange student for a year. One of those huge experiences in my life that really changed me as a person, I think. But, that was an opportunity where I definitely learned my Spanish skills and my speaking abilities of the Spanish language. So I was able to really use that on these humanitarian missions, which mostly were to like South American or Spanish speaking countries. So in addition to, being a medic and or a nurse providing care to people, I was often identified to be an interpreter of sorts, someone who could stand alongside the providers and ask questions simple as, where does it hurt, or how long has that been happening, or, what are the symptoms. So that was rewarding, that I was able to be able to communicate with people. Another thing that I was asked to do on those types of missions was, because we had such a large amount of people, obviously we could only see so many at a time, but we would bring in like, a group of 25 or 30 at a time. And while they were kind of waiting to get their vital signs taken and get to see the provider, we brought them into a classroom environment. And usually it was me alongside some of the local military forces that were like providing security for us in that area. We would do very simple classes, simple hygiene things like, the benefits of and how important it is to wash your hands with soap and water, not to have your animals in the house, because there's various diseases and illnesses that could be contracted, or, how to boil your water before you drink it because everything's contaminated. They don't have clean drinking water. It was opportunities to really think deep down within ourselves about, all of the wonderful things that we have back home and that we should be very grateful for, because not everyone has that. And oftentimes we kind of get caught up in life and we don't think about, these kinds of circumstances. So to go there and to literally have hands on and communicate and talk with and take care of people was extremely rewarding, even though we knew that many of them, after they left us, they may not ever have an opportunity again. But even personally for me to know that, we made their day that one day, or we provided pain medication, or were able to clean a wound and bandage it and give them some supplies, or just simple things, again, that we take for granted, kind of over the counter stuff. It was so rewarding, and they were so grateful in so many ways. It was truly just so heartwarming, those experiences.
So how important do you think these global health engagements are for the military? Is it something that you felt prepared you for deployment and wartime scenarios? And is it something that's worth continuing for our medics and our healthcare providers?
Definitely prepared me and many others, for those, for deployments, for war situation. Again, nothing really can prepare you like the real thing, right? And having that opportunity, even in Afghanistan, we saw things that we've never seen here in the United States. We had a young man who came in, he literally was almost paralyzed, and nobody could really figure out what was going on. And we had some capability for some of the providers to have conversations or meetings virtually with providers back home to talk about these cases. And like, what is this? And we learned that that young man in particular had tetanus. We haven't had, I've never seen anybody with tetanus. We all get vaccinated when we're children, when we're babies. And, that's how we start that process. So to see that and to see some of those landmark, signs and symptoms, and, to talk about the treatments, and actually to see that go into effect and make him better, it's rewarding. It was unbelievable. He would have never probably had that treatment if it weren't for us, and probably wouldn't have, survived. We saw goiters, women, with big goiters in their necks, again, something that we haven't seen in here, because, we have iodized salt and, just simple things that we never even think of because they're everyday things for us, but, something that they don't have there. So it was a learning experience, and it definitely prepared us for real world missions, which I've been on many of, throughout my career. I always have said to, higher command structures, in my chain of command, that, those humanitarian missions, especially, and even opportunities for our soldiers to, go into military treatment facilities during their annual training 2-week period. Because, many of our medics, they don't work in the medical field, in their civilian life, but having those opportunities to really be in it, and to have hands-on training and see that stuff. Like, there's nothing more valuable than that. And I think it's probably one of the best retention tools that we have to be able to provide opportunities for people to do that.
So speaking of retention, you said that you hit 20 years as enlisted while you were in Afghanistan, but you
Right.
still kind of went on. You earned your BSN. You became a commissioned officer in the United States Army Reserve. What led you to continue serving the country in uniform?
Well, again, it was probably the highlight of my career, the deployment, for many of the reasons I've already talked about, but just in general, there was just no way that I was ready to, give that up. I had learned so much, experienced so much, and I just I didn't want it to end. There was no way I was ready to retire. I wanted to see what else was going to, be out there for me, what other opportunities I would have. I never thought about nursing as a profession, but that definitely added to what I was doing back home at the VA. You know, I wanted to come back from the deployment and I wanted to utilize my experiences and my skills to, you know, do other things in my military career, and my civilian career, because they so closely, fit each other. So I had that opportunity, a few years after coming back from the deployment, to, join a program that I'm now the program manager of, the post 9/11 military to VA program, which back then was the Operation Enduring Freedom Iraqi Freedom Program. And that was where I really felt that being involved in that program and having opportunities in the military, I've always felt very blessed to kind of have my feet in two big doors, Department of Defense, the military career, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA career. How much of a blessing it was for me to be able to speak both languages, to learn from each of those environments, and to carry some of those experiences into the other to educate people. Unfortunately, over my years of experience, and here in Wisconsin, we don't have active duty bases. We have Reserve and National Guard. It's been a learning curve for a lot of people, and I feel like there's a lot of knowledge gaps between DoD, the military, and the VA regarding, just eligibility for care and services, resources, benefits, and that kind of thing. So I've often tried to use both of my experiences to educate the other entity.
How would you say that your experience as enlisted for 20 years helped you become a better commissioned officer?
Leadership experiences in general, kind of working my way up the NCO ranks and having those opportunities for leadership training, that's very valuable in the military. The Army, anyway, offers lots and lots of opportunities if someone wants to take advantage of those, experiences, to become better leaders. Before my deployment, I was already a nurse and I could have been commissioned, but I really enjoyed being an NCO, because that's a lot to get up to the higher ranks, to be a senior NCO. But I hung out with all the nurses because those are my friends and my cohort of people. So they for years literally tried to get me to go over to the dark side to become an officer, and wanted me to get my commission, but I just never really felt like I wanted to do it until we got to Fort McCoy and we were getting to deploy, and ended up being Afghanistan. So I met with one of the recruiters while I was there and said, "All right, let me just fill out the packet." And it was super exciting. While I was in theater, I received an email one day saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected for a direct commission to first lieutenant." So I got to even pass by second lieutenant and go right to first lieutenant. It was so exciting. Everyone was real happy for me. I was super happy too, because again, I was at that 20-year mark and I knew there was just no way that I was going to retire. And I wanted different opportunities. I wanted to have different experiences, and becoming an officer was going to be that opportunity. So I definitely, it was just real exciting when I got back from the deployment and we met up with our families for the first time at Fort McCoy. It was wonderful. My family was there and they were able to participate in the actual pinning ceremony. So that was literally a new beginning for me as an officer, and then trying to kind of figure out, what that would mean for me. And it meant for me that, I wanted to continue to lead. And I found myself in numerous command positions after that. Pretty much, honestly, my whole 20 years of being an officer, I've been in command most of the time, various different units. So I just love it because it gives me opportunities to advocate for people, gives me opportunities to be in those meetings behind closed doors to talk frankly and openly about, issues or shortcomings or, you know, lack of supplies or personnel or, whatever the issue might have been. But to just really have opportunities also to be in those trainings and those leadership educational opportunities to learn more about the big picture about the military. As an NCO, I was really focused at being a doer. And as an officer, you're more focused on being a planner, and then learning how to, establish good relationships with the NCOs to make sure that, you can give a good commander's intent and then let them run with it and be the doers and make it happen. That was a bit of a learning curve for me, to be honest, because I was so used to being the doer. So, delegating to people was not something I was used to doing. I was used to just getting stuff done. So I learned a lot from those experiences being in command as an officer.
So, one of the important leadership opportunities that you did have as a commissioned officer is you commanded the 409th Medical Company Area Support Unit, and your unit was selected for Homeland Operations Sea Bernie mission. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how military medicine prepares to deal with that chem bio scenario that we could face in a future conflict.
I was actually fortunate enough to have the experience of actually standing that unit up and becoming the commander of it all kind of at the same time. We kind of morphed another unit that I was commanding into the 409th. And shortly after we stood the unit up, we were doing really well with, getting all of our equipment and getting stood up with all of our personnel and that kind of thing. So we were selected for that Homeland Operations mission, HLO. None of us had really heard about the mission, so it was exciting to have U.S. Army Reserve Command USARC come, to our home station, which was located in Madison, Wisconsin, to tell us about the mission and tell us a little bit about, what to expect. So there was a lot of learning and a lot of training that was involved with that mission in particular. At that time, we kind of looked at it as we put away all of our Army green, mission equipment and all of that. And we now were given millions of dollars of new equipment. And we were sent off to various sites, across the nation to do training. Some of it was very intense training, tried to make it very realistic for us in learning how to deal with casualties that are affected by, chemical, biological, nuclear agents. That in itself was kind of scary because, to think about those things and to think about the reality was really, really something, and here we are now prepping for that. So it was just really an exciting time for all of us. Initially, we were told that we were only going to be on the mission for 2 years. It was going to be 1 year of train up and 1 year actually on the mission. And we were actually the first Army Reserve medical unit that was selected to be. It was typically to be on the mission. It was typically an active duty mission. Due to circumstances beyond our control, we actually ended up being on that mission for a total of 4 years. And part of being on that mission meant that there were about 12 to 15 of us at any given time who were actually put on active duty orders to be stationed at our home base to literally, organize and, develop all of the training and everything that went along with being on this mission, all of the equipment, all of the training, personnel training, training on the equipment, everything that had to do with the new mission. So it was a huge undertaking, and it was the first time in my military career as a commander having the opportunity to be there full time. Quite honestly, in years past, when I was commanding another unit or a couple other units, I often thought to myself, I can't believe that this position isn't full time. It's virtually impossible to be a commander or a first sergeant to be in a leadership position and to get everything done that you needed to get done in 1 weekend a month. It's a full-time job for sure. And lo and behold, my dream kind of came true. There I was on orders and stationed at the unit and just, again, learning so much to do with the mission. And it was just unbelievable how quickly the entire unit came together and took ownership of the mission. And, everyone just trained hard, gave it their all. And it was just very rewarding in that way. I think when we went to some of those sites and we got to train with other components of the Army. We did the National Guard, we were the Reserve, and of course, active duty. And we also got to work with the Air Force. So to be able to go to some of these training sites, which we had to every year, twice a year, we had to be validated by higher military entities to make sure that we were actually prepared for the mission should anything happen. We were very closely scrutinized on everything. But when we went to those training sites and had those opportunities to really be in a simulated but very realistic environment, it was amazing. It was just amazing. Just, no one wanted us to actually have to do it for real, because that would mean we were not doing well in the US, to have something like that happen in an event like that, a disaster. But it was just extremely rewarding. And I think everyone literally, like I said, gave it their all. And it was just such a camaraderie that was developed, amongst every level of, soldiers, everyone from the physicians all the way down to, the privates. It was a great experience for all of us. It was so fulfilling because literally over those 4 years, I could stand up and brief any of those generals and feel super confident that I knew my team was ready. We literally were such a well-oiled team and just ready to be available if the call ever came.
What would you say is the most difficult part of the mission in dealing with a chem, bio, or nuclear incident? Maybe something that normal people wouldn't realize, but now you have all this training. What do you think is the most concerning or difficult thing that we would have to deal with?
Well, it's fear of the unknown and knowing the potential damage that could be done by chemicals and nuclear biological agents. It's mind-blowing, honestly, just to learn about those things, much less have to deal with decontamination and, a whole new way of having to perform your medical duties in treating patients. The whole contamination, decontamination, communicating with patients, getting them through the line in a timely manner so that they can, get to the next level of care in a timely manner. There were just so many aspects that, again, I think we take so many things for granted in normal everyday life and just seeking medical care and treatment that most people probably aren't thinking of all the things that go along with, having to treat, patients who are contaminated.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I got to do in my career was I went to the Chem Bio course at Fort Detrick, and I remember doing the decon, wearing those butyl rubber suits and Mach
Yep.
4, and just providing any amount of medical care was just so difficult that it was amazing to me and eye-opening that that would not be a very fun place to have to operate in that
And
environment.
to wonder, again, donning all of that equipment and gear prior to even having contact with the patient, as you're talking about, and to think could this really work? Could we actually have surviving patients after having to go through that? You just, again, the communication piece with the mask on, the gas mask, and not able to, have that tactile, touching the patient and feeling landmarks or whatever. It was just such a different way of having to maneuver through, patient care. It was amazing. It was amazing, an amazing mission. And we did so well. We received so many kudos and accolades, for the time that we spent on the mission. I think everybody has great memories of that mission.
We had another opportunity to deal with kind of a different biological mission. In 2020, you received orders to active duty to support a COVID-19 operation in the Northeast. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what the U.S. Army Reserve was doing to support the COVID response in America.
The COVID era. It was a stressor for all of us across the nation. I think we all felt the stressors associated with COVID-19 and, again, fear of the unknown. It was such a new thing for almost all of us to, have to learn about and deal with. So due to my military background and some of my experiences, I was again working at the VA, and I was asked to step up and take a position in leading the effort on, standing up our COVID clinics. And prior to even getting patients to come, because vaccines weren't readily available right away or anything like that, it was, working with incident command, developing an incident command system, which I was very familiar with because of that CBRNE mission. Being a part of that and being on a task force at the VA, at my local VA where I worked, was really exciting. And as time was progressing and we were seeing things even in the news, I was not really surprised at all that I got the call that we were potentially going to mobilize or send people to help in the effort, of COVID-19. So I literally got the call, and basically they said, you have 24 hours, get your stuff together and meet us up at Fort Sheridan, which is where I was located at a unit down in Fort Sheridan, Illinois at the time. So I literally had to run upstairs and talk to my boss and say the call came, and I'm going to be gone as of tomorrow. And I had to come home, get all my stuff together and pack and say goodbye to my family and my loved ones. So sorry, I'm getting a little emotional because it was a very emotional time. It was fear of the unknown. People were dying all over the place. My kids were like, my God, you're going into harm's way. It was almost worse than my trip to Afghanistan in their minds because they were living it and they were seeing it, So we got the call, and I was selected to be on a team that headed over to Boston, Massachusetts. We trained hard in a very short period of time. We had to make sure that everybody was trained up on, taking proper precautions. Again, putting on all the gear, the protective gear, donning and doffing correctly. Everybody was confused. What goes first? Like, even though many of us work in the medical world, it was almost like there was some extra component that it just was more of a fear factor, or it just seemed very stressful, just very stressful. And just to make sure that, we were training up on just basic stuff with the medics, making sure many of the medics that were assigned to the unit, they were great medics, but many of them didn't even work in the medical field in their civilian world. So just making sure that everybody was really up to speed on, just basic care too. It was really crucial for us before we actually deployed. So we did go over to Boston. We were put into one of the big convention centers in downtown, and we actually worked right alongside civilian medical entities. And that was such a great opportunity as well. They learned a lot from us. Like when they saw us roll in and get all of our areas set up and roll out all of our stuff and get our board all situated with all of our information, many of them came over and said, wow, you guys are like really organized, And of course, here we are, this is what we do in the military. And they're like, well, can we kind of, share in some of that? Or would you mind if we kind of use that stuff? Like, take pictures of your board and use it. And we're like, well, of course, But it was really an eye-opening experience for us as well to really work with them. This was their home base. Many of them, they were from that area. So we had to really lean on them too for resources, especially resources that were available to us to move patients in and out of the facility, connect them with, different levels of care when they were well enough to, leave our facility that we were working in. So it was just great that we were able to have that bond with them. And again, the fulfillment of, personal fulfillment of knowing like we're doing such good work. You almost forgot about the environment you were in. It became second nature to don and doff all of that equipment every day in and out and, make sure everybody was okay. And it was just it was a really unique experience, And I'm glad that I was able to participate in that.
Some of our listeners, and including myself, are old enough to remember the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, the MASH, which was converted to several iterations, including the Combat Support Hospital, which then has recently converted to the Field Hospital and Modular Hospital, concept. And you had the opportunity to serve as the commander of the 452nd Field Hospital in Milwaukee in 2021, which is a new field hospital because it was recently converted. What kind of lessons did you learn from that? And what kind of advice would you provide to someone who's preparing to take command of a medical unit that, maybe hadn't had that experience with a similar unit before?
Well, first of all, it was such an honor to be selected to be the commander of the 452. The 452 was the unit that I first joined back in 1984 and the unit that I deployed with to Afghanistan. So I was very familiar. It's located here in Milwaukee where I live. So for me to become the commander of the unit was literally like a full circle for me, to start out as a private E1 and kind of go up the ranks and have the experiences that I did while serving in that unit, and then to now be selected to be the commander was truly is like almost a dream come true. So that in itself was a great opportunity for me. Again, because I'm older and I've been around a while, I also experienced all those phases. And when I started at the 452, it was a general hospital. Then we converted to that CASH, Combat Support Hospital. Everything changed, in a way of, the equipment, the modular system. I mean, spent hours and hours and days and weeks training up at Fort McCoy, set up the hospital, tear it down, move it, set it up, tear it down, the mobility piece. Get all the equipment in there, make sure the equipment's good. And as I kind of worked my way up in the NCO ranks, I was always, finding myself, again, being in charge of some of those sections of the hospital, that we all had to like make it come together and work. And we also at that time thought to ourselves, especially those hot, ugly days at Fort McCoy, would this stuff really work? Would this really work if we ever had to go to war? And like I said, we literally found ourselves deploying to Afghanistan, and that's exactly what we did. And when I talk to people about it, I literally talk about MASH because most people can at least think a little bit about, understand a little bit about what I'm talking about. But I also then saw the conversion to the field hospital. Again, the Army trying to be more mobile, have, smaller teams that are more mobile, and of course our equipment, being able to move it across the battlefield as needed. Very different. And it was really hard to explain to younger soldiers who never had the opportunities in the past, like I did, to go through various conversions about the mission and, how this is all going to work. And it was just really a big undertaking. One of the things that sticks out to me in commanding the 452 was that we had just a very young unit. A lot of people who had deployed, and some deployed multiple times, were leaving service or leaving the unit. And again, we had a really young group of people. So it was literally starting from scratch and trying to build everything up from square one, training, everything. It was quite challenging, but it was very rewarding to see things working, and just to see how this would fit together. If we were to get the call again, and how that would look on the battlefield is certainly way different today than it was when I went to Afghanistan. That's for sure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You've also spent significant time serving in the VA system, not only as a bedside nurse, but you also earned a master's in nursing with an emphasis on veteran and military healthcare, and then served as program director for the post 9/11 military to VA program. What does that program do, and what is your role in it?
Well, the post 9/11 military to VA program originally was started out as the OEF program. It was established in the VA in 2007, so it was a few years after I had returned from my deployment to Afghanistan. Like, the mission of our team and our program it was established to really ensure that all transitioning service members from any branch, that they were, transitioning smoothly into the VA healthcare system. My team members, I was a case manager on the team before I became the program manager, so I became very familiar with case management. We found, very early on that we were really having to look at things in a different way than we ever did before. It was like, I call it kind of the younger population, people who were transitioning out of, service time into our system. Yet, they had all kinds of things that they were dealing with. It was a very stressful time. The stress was almost overwhelming to them. There were a number of things that were potential stressors for people. Just the transition itself and leaving military service, and oftentimes it was not on their own terms. They were injured, while they were in theater, and they weren't able to stay serving. They weren't able because they were medically retired or medically discharged. So just for them to be discharged kind of not on their own terms and kind of feeling, what purpose do I have now? Trying to find some purpose and some meaning, and what does that mean for them moving on with their future? Our team is really designed to help with, we're subject matter experts on this era of veteran, and we work very closely with local military units, with DOD in general, with all the military treatment facilities, because many of our referrals come right directly out of DOD. We're helping to prepare them to not only get connected with care, but resources and a lot of education. It's unfortunate, but I feel as if the military, and I can only speak for the Army because that's who I was attached to when I was in service, I don't think we do as good of a job as we can. There's just a lot of gaps in knowledge regarding services and resources and things that are available to service members when they transition out of the military. So my team is just really very experienced at looking at the full picture, doing complete psychosocial assessments, looking at everything from, jobs, education, financial hardships, possibly relationship issues, just any other physical limitations that they may be having, and just trying to get them connected as soon as possible, and get them on, on the right trail to recovery, and not only to help them, but to also help, family members and people who are important to them. In my role as program manager, it's my job to make sure that the team is, doing their jobs, and they do a fantastic job. Most people on my team have been with me for many, many years. But a big portion of what I do as the program manager is not only ensure that they're transitioning, but really to get out into the community. I love to get out in the community to educate people about VA services and just resources in general, both, at the VA and in the community as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that, that's got to be a very satisfying, role to play because, it's can be very confusing when you're transitioning from active duty, and it's not always just a natural, seamless process. And having folks that are there to help guide the way and provide that information is just critical. When I transitioned from active duty, I was just absolutely blown away by the amount of resources that the VA had for transitioning, active duty members. And it's something that you don't really talk a lot about on active duty. And so, thank you for what you're doing. I think that's a great thing.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have is getting people to come through the door. Again, when I kind of think of younger generation, their priorities may be different, when they get back from, a deployment or, mobilization, unfortunately, they're not ready to take in all that information at that, right when they get back. Their goal is to reestablish relationships with their families, with their, loved ones, to get back to jobs, so they can make money to take care of their families, schooling. If they were in school, many of them were students and they were kind of plucked out of their, programs, to deploy. So VA is not the first thing on their mind, that's for sure. And I try so hard in my team when we're doing outreach, we try so hard to really kind of hit home how important it is for future too. Even if you just come and, we get you assigned to a primary care provider and you come once a year for a physical, we want to have the opportunity to meet with you and to talk to you, to share resources about benefits and everything else, just so if the time comes that you need a little extra help or you need help in any way, shape, or form, you know who to call. We're here for you.
One of the other things that I thought was a really cool part of your biography was that you participated as a guardian in the Stars and Stripes Honor Flight program. Tell us about that experience and what it's meant to you.
Oh my gosh. Again, I've had so many great experiences throughout my career, my life. I can't even tell you. So working with veterans is obviously near and dear to my heart. Oftentimes I forget I'm a veteran too. But having the honor of, serving and providing, care to our veterans, our heroes, has always been so honorable and it's just so exciting to me. When I was at the bedside nursing, I almost, I loved working like the night shift when many of the veterans, they weren't sleeping at night, and they would just open up and share their stories and tell you about their military service. Oftentimes I never told them that I was serving as well, but usually somebody on my team would, like, did Darcie tell you she's in the Army? And then of course that opened up a whole bunch more conversation. It was just always great to be able to, make that connection. So I've always enjoyed that. And then when I learned about the honor flight, it kind of came upon, in a way, I was literally with my unit at an event, and someone who with the Badger Honor Flight in Madison, Wisconsin, approached me, knew that I was the commander of the unit, and started talking about, thank you for your service and all of that stuff. And then we started talking about he was the person who was in charge of the honor flight there. I had never really even heard about it. So he told me about it. And of course, my first thing was, oh my gosh, I want to get my whole entire unit involved. How can we get involved with this? This is something that, I felt would be a great opportunity for younger soldiers, especially, to have a way to connect with veterans. So anyway, long story short is I did have the opportunity to go on my first flight. It was with a World War II veteran. It was just such an experience. It's hard to explain, but just to be with him, to be under his care and his family, to, give me that opportunity to be with him. He needed a little bit of extra care. So it was just great just to hear from him, to talk with him, to share our stories, and then to be there to witness the reaction to everything. Like they meaning the honor flight, they put on such a wonderful day. It's a one-day event. And that was a World War II veteran, but I've also had the pleasure of being with a Korean veteran and a Vietnam veteran. And all three experiences were absolutely fabulous, somewhat different, only in that, it was different eras, different stories that I got to learn about. But to see the looks on their faces and to see the emotion with the flight, especially I'll remember the Vietnam veteran. He had shared with me prior to going on the flight that, he'd never had the chance to even go there. He didn't really know too much about the monument or the wall, in DC. And he told me he was a little bit nervous because he really didn't have a lot of contact with people from prior, service time or whatnot. And again, to experience that with him, to be there for him when he did experience it, it was just, everybody was just in such a emotional high. It was just such a great gathering. And, some of the things that they do on that honor flight is they do what they call a mail call. That happens on the flight back to home base, to Milwaukee for us. And they ask in advance family members and guardians to write letters or send pictures or anything, because as you know, as a military person, one of the things we live for, whether it's basic training or we're deployed somewhere across the world, we live for mail call, right? We can't wait to receive mail. And it's just an exciting time for everyone. And a couple of my veterans, back in the day, they didn't have mail systems, they didn't have computers and cell phones or anything like that. So to get a letter from home was just a big thing, So they literally handed out packets, envelopes for each veteran on that flight with all these letters and pictures and all different kinds of things, thanking them for their service, honoring them for their service. And it was just so emotional for them just to experience that. But even bigger and better was when you returned home. Literally, General Mitchell Field, which is our airport here in Milwaukee, the minute they got off of that plane, there were bands playing. There were people doing salutes, with the swords. The entire way that we walked to get, to the end of the journey to where they would meet up with their families was lined with literally thousands of people. Everyone cheering. I'm sorry, but cheering them on and holding signs and dressed in uniform. And if you've never experienced it, it's just hard to really explain it, but it was such an emotional event for everybody involved. And just great experiences for me. Again, the connection with veterans, and being able to hear their stories, it was just great. It was such an honor for me to do that.
Yeah, and it's such a neat thing, especially for, like Vietnam veterans who didn't have that celebration when they got back. They missed that. And now just to see the gratitude that people have for their service and appreciation about what veterans do. I think that's a great effort. And I hope more people get involved in that honor flight program, because I think it is something that is very meaningful, not only to the veteran, but to the people that are the guardians that are part of
The
assisting them.
guardians of their families. People
Right.
are so dedicated. All of the volunteers that are used to make that trip go off. It's amazing. It's here. It's when they land in DC. It's along the entire tour for the day. Everything from meals and transportation, and it's a very coordinated event. And I still keep in touch with two of my veterans. One passed away, and we exchange like Christmas greetings, or one guy calls me on Veterans Day, and you know uh, different holidays and that type of thing. And he continues as my Vietnam vet. He shows up to the medical center every few weeks for a group that he goes to, and he always calls me, or he'll try to stop by to see me. And he just wants to share his experiences, and how grateful he is to have the VA, and people who understand him, and who are part of his life.
What advice would you give to the younger generation who might be interested in a career in military medicine? What would you tell them?
Well, I've always kind of personally felt that young people who might not really know what they want to do, after high school, not everybody wants to go to college, and, now that I'm older and I can reflect back, like, who at 18 or 19-year-olds, really knows what they want to do with the rest of their life? They've hardly experienced life yet. So I've always felt that if somebody's in that situation and they don't really know quite what they want to do, I often, talk to people or young people in my family, or, wherever I see young people, church or whatever, talk to them about my experiences and what an experience it is to join the military. Perhaps it at times comes off as, what do you mean good experience? We're gonna be going to war, and or whatever. You get all kinds of responses, but honestly, I really do believe that people, should entertain the idea of joining the military for lots and lots of reasons. And again, I share my experiences. Technically, I've really recruited a lot of people over my time to come into the Army Reserve anyway. And sometimes that seems to be a little bit easier of a thought for them to join kind of on a part-time basis versus full-time, because then that, means a whole different thing. So the military has provided me so many wonderful opportunities, not only in furthering my education. I've been to a number of leadership courses. I've been able to get training that I would have never received anywhere else in the world, or at any other moment. These missions that I've been on have been so rewarding, so fulfilling. So there's a lot of good things, about the military, and it's not just, going to boot camp, or, there's lots of things, and especially for medical professionals. Many who might have already graduated or are working in the field, but perhaps are looking for, something else that they could do. A lot of people join the military, oftentimes because they're patriotic and they feel like they want to serve their country, for that reason. But, it's also, kind of to be a part of something kind of bigger than yourself, is what they usually say, to be a part of a team, that does, these great things, in service to your country, and just to help others, especially in the medical field, those experiences, those opportunities that are available. And not only, is it just, being a doctor or a medic, or, a radiologist, or, somebody, we kind of do that in our normal civilian life, but it's those other opportunities that I think people are looking for, people who may be a little bit more adventurous, or looking to do something kind of outside of the box, maybe in research or teaching, or there's just so many opportunities for people. So I do my best to talk about my experiences because I've had so many wonderful ones. And yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for anybody who wants to do something different, I guess, or meaningful.
When the history books are written 50 to 100 years from now, how would you like your history in military medicine to be recorded? What would you like your legacy to be?
That's kind of a hard question to answer. I just retired in June 1st with 40 years of service, and I just can't even, I've told you about some of my experiences, but the journey over that amount of time was truly just incredible in so many ways. It was a lot of opportunities, a lot of positive experiences, but certainly there were not so good experiences. There were, challenges along the way. But despite those challenges and stressors, I guess at sometimes, it really provided me so much opportunity to grow as a person in so many ways. I've met so many wonderful people along the way. I've traveled to numerous parts of the world and experienced different cultures and opportunities to provide medical care to people. Those who are, much less fortunate than we are, for sure. I just really am filled with a sense of pride for the work that I've done. And I'm just grateful that I had the opportunity to have all those experiences. I certainly could not have done it probably for so long without the support of family, friends, colleagues that I've worked with, especially when you get into leadership positions. You have to leave for a lot of different training events and, leadership, trainings and, all kinds of things. So you're often having to get on orders and leave your work environment. So I often almost felt guilty, like, oh my gosh, they're probably thinking, here she goes again, she's leaving, and especially when I left for that 4-year period when we were on that Seaburn mission, that was super exciting. But it was different because I was disconnected from my team that I had been with for so many years, but they were so supportive of me being on that because they knew that it was like I was kind of in my element there. So, and they knew how much I enjoyed my military life. I just am grateful that I've had so many people in my life who have had patience, understanding, and people who have just supported me through thick or thin throughout the entire way. I want them to know how important they are to me. Here I go again, getting a little emotional. It's just been the honor of my life. I really can't explain it any differently to have all of these opportunities and to be able to serve my country in such a way. I often get asked by a lot of people, well, now that you're retired, how's that going to look for you? Or how do you feel about that? And right now, I think it's a little too early to tell. I definitely miss people, that's for sure. But there's nothing, it's hard to explain. Again, you'll understand though, because you're a military person, that camaraderie, that togetherness and that feeling that we get when we work as a team and we accomplish wonderful things together. And we have a journey, even if it's a horrible environment and, you're not getting any sleep and no showers and all of that, it doesn't matter. We're doing it together. We're all in the same boat. So I'm just so grateful for, God giving me my health and allowing me to be able to sustain such a long career in the military. Did that answer your question?
It does. We've been speaking with Lieutenant Colonel Darcie Greuel on WarDocs podcast. Darcie, thanks again for sharing your experiences and insights with us, and congratulations and thank you for your awesome 40-year career and your service to your nation. We wish you the best in retirement.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure and an honor to be here today talking to you about my career. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to WarDocs. We sure hope you enjoyed it. WarDocs is a nonprofit organization supported by donations from listeners like you. Please follow and subscribe to our show on whatever platform you consume your podcasts, and rate and review this episode, and share the show with your contacts on social media. Find out more information about our show, our guests, and how to become a member of Team WarDocs on WarDocsPodcast.com. Thank you for your support. If you like war stories and medical drama, WarDocs has you covered. Spread the word.